was November 15, 2000, in the quiet city of Augusta, America. The time was approaching 7 p.m. Summer had ended, and the chill of winter had begun to settle in. On that calm street, a gentle breeze stirred the air, as neighbors enjoyed their peaceful evening, unaware of the horror about to unfold. Suddenly, the fire department received an emergency call. A mobile home in the city was on fire. Now, a mobile home is like a regular house, but smaller and movable, almost like a large caravan that can be transported with a vehicle. Firefighters rushed to the scene immediately. As the red lights of the fire engine lit up the darkening sky, they saw thick smoke billowing ahead. They wasted no time and brought the fire under control within 10 minutes. But it was already too late. The mobile home was completely destroyed. Nothing remained but charred iron rods and ash. As the smoke began to clear, a firefighter stepped inside to check for any survivors. What he discovered would haunt everyone present. Inside the ruins, they found the body of the homeowner, a woman named Edith Ann Haynes, burned beyond recognition. The initial investigation suggested that the fire had broken out while she was in the bathroom. Trapped inside and unable to escape, she tragically died in the flames. But this was just the beginning. As authorities dug deeper, the truth that emerged was far more chilling. The way forensics unraveled the clues behind this fire turned a tragic accident into a full-blown criminal investigation. There's suspense, there are twists, and what lies ahead is a case that will keep you hooked. Today, we're going to decode this gripping investigation. You're watching DCR Crimes Decodes, and I'm your host, Krishi. Let's dive into today's story. Are you drawn to the darker side of reality, real crimes, shocking evidence, and unsolved mysteries? Then you found the right channel. Subscribe to my channel for more videos that explore crime scenes, mysterious cases, and shocking stories. Due to YouTube's content rules, I can't show everything here. But if you want to see the original crime scene photos and uncensored content, check out my Telegram channel. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more. Most of you watching my channel haven't subscribed yet. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support really helps the channel grow and motivates me to bring you more true crime stories without any break. Edith Ann Haynes was born in 1947, a kind-hearted woman who led a simple life. Divorced and living alone, she carried her hardships with grace and a warm smile. A few years before this tragedy, she suffered the devastating loss of her 30-year-old son. Yet, despite her grief, she went to work each day at a nearby paper factory, determined not to let sorrow define her. As retirement approached, Edith decided she no longer needed a large home. She sold her family house, bought a modest mobile home, and moved in, dreaming of peaceful days ahead. But barely 3 days after settling in, her life would be forever changed by a terrible, unexpected fire. The police, who began their investigation into the fire, discovered that it had originated from the bedroom of the mobile home. However, the exact cause of the fire remained unclear. The initial report simply stated that the source of the blaze was undetermined. Based on this, investigators initially suspected it might have been due to an electrical malfunction. But everything changed when Edith's autopsy report came in. The medical examiners noticed something unusual. Her lungs were completely clear, with no trace of smoke or soot in her trachea. This raised a serious red flag. In most fire-related deaths, the victim inhales a significant amount of smoke before dying, which causes carbon particles and other substances to settle in the airways. The lack of such evidence in Edith's body strongly suggested one disturbing possibility. She was already dead before the fire started. Additionally, the autopsy revealed another shocking detail. Edith's neck bone was broken. This raised an immediate question: how could a neck bone break in a fire? Fire doesn't typically cause such injuries, and this pointed to a different cause of death altogether. The conclusion: Edith had been strangled. Furthermore, there were clear fingerprint marks on her neck, which confirmed that someone had physically assaulted her. To make matters worse, the autopsy also showed signs of blunt force trauma, indicating she had been struck with a heavy object, perhaps something like an iron rod or a piece of wood, before her death. With these new findings, the police began to shift their focus. The initial suspicion of an electrical fire was now unlikely, and the burning of the house seemed more like an attempt to cover up a murder. The police were left with one major question: who would want Edith dead, and why? To shed more light on the situation, the police called in a fire forensic expert, Muclane, to examine the crime scene. They needed to figure out whether the fire had started on its own or if it had been deliberately set. More importantly, they wanted to know how and where the fire had begun, and whether it was linked to the murder in any way. With so many questions left unanswered, the investigation was far from over. Now, forensic expert Mike got to work, determined to trace the origin and cause of the fire, to figure out where the blaze began and how it spread. He carefully examined every room in the burned mobile home. He even cut into some of the charred wood and debris, looking for clues. After a detailed search, he identified the exact location where the fire likely started and drew a diagram indicating the potential heat source. To dig deeper, he collected samples of the burnt wood and sent them to the forensic lab for chemical analysis. The goal was to determine if the fire had been fueled by an accelerant, something like petrol. In the lab, the forensic team began by heating the burnt wood samples to release any remaining traces of fuel in the form of gas. These gases were then analyzed using a device called a gas chromatograph. This machine is capable of detecting and identifying chemical compounds by comparing them to known substances, in this case, against a library of 780 reference fuel samples. The result was conclusive. The fire had been started with petrol. This meant the fire was not accidental, it was arson, set intentionally. Now the question became even more urgent: who was with Edith in the mobile home that night, just before the fire? The search for the killer was narrowing, and the investigation was about to take a new turn. Since whoever was with Edith last was likely involved, the police focused on finding out who that might have been. During their inquiry, neighbors reported seeing a red car parked outside Edith's mobile home at around 3:00 p.m. on the day of the incident. However, by 5:00 p.m., the car was gone. Digging deeper, investigators discovered that just 3 days before the fire, Edith had sold her previous home to none other than her co-worker, Michael. He had bought it as an investment. When police traced the red car seen outside her home, it was confirmed to belong to Michael. This raised serious suspicion. Why was his car there 2 hours before the fire, and then suddenly gone? The fire broke out shortly after 7:00 p.m. Could Michael have returned on foot or by some other means after moving his car, to avoid being noticed? Considering the forensic findings that petrol had been used to intentionally start the fire, police began to suspect that Michael might have returned to the scene after removing his vehicle, potentially to commit the crime without drawing attention. With this new lead, the investigation zeroed in on Michael as a key suspect. But during the investigation, Michael told police that he was not present at the scene of the incident and had nothing to do with it. When police cross-checked his claims, it appeared to be true. He had a solid alibi. At 6:41 p.m., Michael was having dinner with his wife at a restaurant nearly 30 kilometers away from the crime scene. After dinner, the couple went to a movie that started around 7:00 p.m. The police verified the restaurant bill and the movie tickets, and everything matched Michael's timeline. It was confirmed beyond doubt Michael was not at the mobile home when the fire started. His wife also firmly supported his statement, asking the police why they would lie about such a thing. With no evidence placing him at the scene and a strong alibi in place, the investigation hit a wall. However, something about the situation didn't sit right with the police. What puzzled them was what happened after the movie. When Michael and his wife came out of the theater, he received a phone call from a friend. The friend told him that Edith's mobile home had caught fire. Upon hearing the news, Michael began crying in front of his wife. This reaction seemed off to investigators. How did he already know enough about the fire and have such an emotional reaction so quickly, when the details of the fire and the discovery of Edith's body hadn't yet reached the public? That strange moment triggered the police to look deeper into the timeline and into Michael. The police initially thought that Michael's tears were due to genuine concern for his co-worker. However, what struck them as odd was that Michael's friend, dear viewers who called him, only mentioned that the mobile home had burned but didn't mention that Edith had died in the fire. This omission felt strange, and the police began to reconsider Michael's involvement in the case. Despite the solid alibi for Michael, the case didn't seem to add up. It was then that Mike, the firefield expert, came back into the picture and shed some new light on the situation. Mike explained to the police about a device called a delay ignition device. This device allows a fire to be set to ignite at a later time, whether it's 5 minutes, 5 hours, or even 50 days after it's been set. In other words, it could be used to create a fire at a time when the perpetrator is not even at the scene. Mike's insight opened up a new line of thinking for the police. He suggested that while Michael was at the movie with his wife, he could have used such a device to start the fire in Edith's mobile home. The delay in ignition meant that Michael could have set the fire remotely, ensuring that it would go off long after he had an alibi in place. This revelation added a whole new level of complexity to the investigation. The police now had to consider that Michael might have orchestrated the fire from a distance, using technology to create an alibi while still being responsible for Edith's death. The police found this information from Michael's ex-wife deeply alarming. She revealed that Michael had an unusual fascination with fire. He would often talk about various fire-starting techniques in great detail, far more than what would be considered casual interest. But what truly disturbed the police was a specific incident she recounted from their past. One night, just before their divorce, Michael called her out of the blue. He insisted that she go stay at her mother's house and to take their dog along. She thought it was odd at the time, but she agreed. That very night, their house mysteriously caught fire. Later, they received a significant insurance payout for the damages. While there was no solid evidence to prove it back then, she had always believed that Michael had planned and executed that fire. Now, with Edith's case looking increasingly similar, especially with the calculated setup of an alibi and the possibility of using delayed ignition, the police saw a disturbing pattern emerging. Michael's past and his ex-wife's testimony were beginning to paint a chilling picture of a man who not only understood fire but knew how to use it to his advantage. As the investigation progressed, the pressure on Michael grew. He initially cooperated with the police, answering their questions with ease. But as they began to ask deeper, more probing questions, something changed. Michael started stammering, his confidence slipping. He had been okay with taking a polygraph test at first, but suddenly, he flatly refused to take it. This sudden shift only added to the growing suspicion surrounding him. With no direct evidence to link Michael to the crime scene, the police obtained a search warrant for his house. When they searched his property, they uncovered key pieces of evidence that would break the case wide open. Among the items seized was the hard drive from Michael's computer. Upon examination, the police discovered troubling search history. Just days before Edith's death, Michael had been searching multiple websites about how to beat a polygraph test, specifically how to lie without being caught. This was a clear indication that he was preparing for something, perhaps anticipating that his involvement in the case might be questioned. But that wasn't all. In the attic of Michael's house, the police found even more shocking items, black magic paraphernalia, which only deepened the mystery around him. However, the most damning piece of evidence was found among his belongings. A fuse wire that was commonly used in delay ignition devices, the very type of device that could have been used to start the fire in Edith's mobile home. With this new evidence, Michael was arrested on charges of arson and murder. The police had finally connected the dots, and Michael's dark secrets were about to be exposed. The prosecution just laid out a compelling case against Michael, revealing his motive and his gruesome plan to cover up his crime. It all began when Edith decided to sell her old house. Michael, her co-worker, offered to buy it from her for $25,000. He promised to pay her in cash, but instead gave her a check and told her not to deposit it until he said so. Something didn't feel right, so 2 days later, on the day of the incident, she decided to deposit the check. That's when Michael went to her mobile home to confront her. The prosecution argued that in a fit of rage, Michael struck Edith hard in the head, knocking her unconscious. Then he strangled her to death. After killing her, he dragged her body to the bathroom, trying to stage the scene to look like an accidental death in the fire. He thought he could outsmart the police and the forensic team by making it look like an electrical fault or a tragic mishap. But his plan was foiled when investigators uncovered the truth. The prosecution was now convinced that Michael's motive was greed and fear. Greed for the $25,000 he was supposed to pay Edith and fear of going to jail for his previous actions. His attempt to cover up his crime with a fire and a series of lies ultimately led to his downfall. But the defense team was just getting started. Could they find any loopholes in the prosecution's evidence? Or would this be the end of Michael? After placing Edith's lifeless body in the bathroom, Michael began executing the next phase of his plan. He took petrol from inside the house and poured it all around, including the front door. Then, to create a solid alibi, he used a fuse wire and some materials available in the home to construct a delay ignition device. Once everything was set, he left the scene. According to the evidence, Michael then took his wife to a restaurant 30 kilometers away. At exactly 6:41 p.m., they had dinner together, and he made sure to keep the receipt. By 7 o'clock p.m., they were in a movie theater, and yes, he kept the ticket stubs as well, while Michael was watching the movie Surrounded. By witnesses, the device he had set earlier ignited the fire around 7:30 p.m. Michael thought he had pulled off the perfect crime. He had created an alibi, destroyed the evidence, and timed everything down to the minute. But then he made one crucial mistake, the mistake that led to his downfall. When the movie ended and he stepped outside, Michael received a phone call from his friend, who informed him that Edith's mobile home was on fire. Importantly, the caller didn't say anything about Edith being dead, but Michael overacted, crying and breaking down in front of his wife, as if he already knew what had happened. This overreaction raised immediate red flags for the police. Michael believed he was smarter than everyone else, and in many ways, he was intelligent, but he chose to use that intelligence in the worst possible way. As the saying goes, even the smartest person can slip. What he didn't anticipate was the power of forensic science. No matter how cleverly he tried to cover his tracks, the investigators pieced it all together. Despite the defense insisting Michael was nowhere near the crime scene and had nothing to do with the fire, the judge wasn't. Convinced, the evidence was overwhelming. Michael was found guilty of murder, arson, and burglary, and sentenced to life in prison with an additional 40 years. So, my dear DCR investigators, what do you think about this incredible forensic investigation? Wouldn't it be amazing to have these kinds of advanced forensic technologies available in our own country too? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Also, let me know what case or topic you'd like me to decode next. Your best comment will be featured in the upcoming video. I'll see you again soon in another thrilling episode. Thank you and bye.